Hi everyone, Ryan here from Fight Game Analysis, and today we're going to be talking about the fight that just wrapped up between Artur Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr. But before we jump into that, if you've been enjoying the content, please go ahead and click on the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate your support. Alright, so just last night we had a big fight wrap up between Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr. Now look, there's been a lot of people who have been talking for a lot of time about how Artur Beterbiev may be the man to beat at 175 pounds. Right? We just most recently heard it talked about when Canelo was getting ready to fight Bivol. Everyone was like, they thought Bivol was an easy pick. They thought it was an easy touch. They thought Canelo was taking the easiest route possible for him to snatch up the belts at 175. Now, on the one hand, they may be correct, particularly after that performance we saw last night from Beterbiev. He may be the man at 175 pounds. He may be able to just storm through everybody out there. That remains to be seen. But that's the way that we were talking about it going in. You know, now building up into this fight, Joe Smith Jr., you know, he earned this position, but he was a huge underdog going in, at least according to Vegas, right? I saw odds as much as 12-1, 13-1 for Beterbiev. I think some money must have came in late on Joe Smith Jr. because we saw the line adjust. I want to say it was the day before the fight or the day of the fight, dropped all the way down to Beterbiev only being like a 7-1 or an 8-1 favorite all week. One of the guys that I like hearing most, Timothy Bradley, right? Tim Bradley was out there and he was talking about how he wasn't saying Joe Smith Jr. was going to win. I don't remember him making an actual prediction. My guess is that he picked Beterbiev, but he was talking about the path that Joe Smith Jr. would have to walk to win the fight. He's like, look, man, Beterbiev can be hit. He squares up. Joe Smith Jr.'s long. He's got real power. He fights behind that jab. He sets some things up. He gets in there, keeps the distance and the range at the outside. Maybe we see something. Maybe we see him have some success. Maybe we end up having to see what Beterbiev does when he faces some real adversity. And those are all fair points. I thought he was harping on it a little bit too much. I thought he was giving Joe Smith Jr. a little bit too much credit, not giving Beterbiev the recognition that he deserves. But it was only slight, whatever. What am I going to, it is what it is. I figured fight night, we're going to see what happens. And man, we did. We did. Joe Smith Jr. comes out there, fights long behind that jab. Applies pressure. Because he thinks, hey, I'm the bigger, taller guy. Not only am I going to work behind this jab, I'm not going to let Beterbiev fight at the pace and the distance that he wants. He's a killer at mid-range. He's great at mid-range. That's cool. We'll keep it at long distance. You know, he wants to get set up. He wants to get in a rhythm and a flow. I'm not going to let him. I'm going to constantly pump this jab in his face, score points, set up some of my own power shots. You know, if that's the game plan that he had coming in, I get it. That all makes sense. That's valid. But it didn't work out that way, dude. Like, Beterbiev came out there and showed us that he's got a whole nother gear and a whole nother skill set than a lot of people originally gave him credit for. Like, they think this guy's just a power puncher. They think this guy's, look at him, he's carved out of stone. Look at the way he's built. He's the most dense human being I've ever seen. Like, people have all these comments about him. Talk about how strong he is and how powerful he is and how he's a power puncher. And then they talk about the negatives. He can be hit. We saw him get caught with a few shots last night. He squares up a little bit too much. Absolutely, in my opinion. Right? Not a perfect fighter. Not flawless victories. But at the same time, he goes out there and always finds a way to get the job done. Last night, pressure gets applied, shows how to use his feet. Joe Smith Jr. is working the jab. Great, I'm going to take that jab away from him. Comes over the top with a clubbing right hand. Right? I think the fight changed. Look, a lot of people talk about how that fight changed after the first knockdown. They talk about the way Joe Smith Jr. was attempting to come in and apply that pressure and go behind that jab. Beterbiev used beautiful footwork. Backs up, sets the trap, steps off slightly on the angle, and then just crushes him over the top with the right hand. Great stuff. But I would make the comment that the fight actually changed about a minute before that. You got about a minute and 20 left in the first round. And almost the exact same sequence plays out, except he doesn't drop Joe Smith Jr. Smith comes in, works behind that jab. Beterbiev catches him right over the top and stuns him. Right? Staggers him a little bit. And then later on in the round ends up scoring that knockdown. But that was the punch. That was the one. Right? When Andre Ward was talking later in the fight, he's like, look, man, you hear about the power. You watch the tape and you see it. You watch the way guys react. You think you can take it. You talk about it all training camp. You convince yourself. Then you go in there and you actually feel that power, and it's a little bit different. You go in there and you feel that power, and maybe if you're not quite ready for it, and maybe you got to ask yourself, do you still want to be there? That's when you really have to make that determination. What am I going to do at this point? Am I going to stay in here and deal with this power? Am I going to stick to the game plan and figure out a way around it? Am I going to dig deep and still attempt to come out with this victory? Or is this the opportunity when I pack it in? Is this the opportunity when I make the deal with myself that let's get this over with? Right now, Andre Ward claims Joe Smith made that deal with himself. Joe Smith decided, I'm not going to deal with this power for 4 to 5 rounds. I'm not going to stick with the game plan. We're going to abandon that. We're going to apply pressure. If I get knocked out, I get knocked out. And I'll be honest, it didn't look exactly like the most sound game plan. And if there was a time when a man had to abandon the game plan to go with something else, I would say that happened probably around the minute 20 mark of that first round, right? About a minute and 20 left. He caught that first right hand. Then he gets knocked down later. And the look on his face changed. His eyes changed. Like Beterbiev is a Terminator, man. That dude goes in there and he has got that power that you get caught with it and you feel that electric shock all the way down in your toes, right? But on top of that, he showed the timing. Did he have great hand speed? I don't know if I'd call it great, but it was good, man. He was whipping those shots off well. He was working slight little angles. He was doing what he wanted to do. So the question becomes at this point, what's next? He said he wants to be undisputed. We saw Yard in the audience talking about how he wants to get the next fight. I think he's the mandatory for one of the belts that Beterbiev holds now. Right? In the back of our mind, we're still remembering Bivol and how he just went out there and beat Canelo. Does that set him up? I mean, Canelo said he wants that fight. Canelo's scheduled to fight Triple G in September. Said he wants to get the rematch with Bivol at 175 pounds. I don't know, man. I don't think he's going to see much more success. Now, that doesn't mean the judges won't give him the win. Let's not forget about the beating that Bivol gave Canelo. Let's not forget about how good Bivol looked in that fight, only to come away with a 115-113 victory. Teddy Atlas made a video, The Anatomy of a Fixed Fight. This is the way it works, people. Look at how, let's break this all down and see about how a man can go out there and win so many rounds and still only win the fight 115-113. Right? It's like the age-old adage. When you, back in the day, when boxing was known for even being more corrupt, what was the saying? When you're fighting the champ in his hometown, you got to go out there and win every round and hope to walk away with a split decision. And we saw that. We saw that in that first fight with Canelo. So let's say Canelo gets by Triple G, which off the top right now I think he's going to do. I think at this age he gets by him. Then let's say he gets the rematch with Bivol. Let's say Canelo wins. You want to see him versus Beterbiev? Let's say Bivol wins. You want to see him versus Beterbiev? I'd actually like to see that Bivol fight, but I got to be honest, man. As skilled as Bivol is, as much as he comes off with those combinations, part of his game is to catch and counter. Part of his game is standing right there, catching your shots and firing back. Now, we saw that work great against Canelo. Canelo will come in with that left hook or that left hook to the body. Bivol was able to catch it and counter back with 3, 4, sometimes 5 punch combinations. He did great work. He was able to push Canelo back with stuff like that. But do you think he's going to be able to do that to Beterbiev? You think he's going to be able to there and stand and catch those shots? Those lunch boxes, you see the size of dude's fist, man? Those lunch boxes that he's going to be slamming into dude's face and into his rib cage? It's a tall order, man. That's going to be a tough one. So look, I was really impressed with what Beterbiev brought to the table last night. Incredibly good performance. Really looking forward to see what he has next for him. He said he wants to be undisputed. People need to be put on notice about this guy. People need to make room. You know, he does not have the biggest name. He does not have the most impressive resume that you've ever seen. But that doesn't mean that he won't. That doesn't mean that as he continues to get in there and get the spotlight shined on him, that more and more people won't recognize the skill set that he has. Boxing, when you look back through the history of boxing, man, the landscape is absolutely littered with people who were very talented and nobody knew about them right up until they knew about them. It's kind of the way it works. Without having a defined pipeline like you see in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball for that matter too, we just don't see the type of progress, and where a lot of guys kind of fall through the cracks and slip by the wayside, and we don't catch up to them until we catch up to them. So I'm not necessarily saying Beterbiev is taking that round. He's got a pedigree. You know, he's been successful for a long time. He just hasn't had the spotlight on him. He just hasn't had the name brand recognition that you've seen from guys who are as skilled as him. But last night was another incredibly good performance. I mean, you go out there and you take a legitimate contender like Joe Smith Jr. Man, I remember watching Joe Smith Jr. knock Bernard Hopkins out of the ring. And he just went out there and absolutely smoked dude. put him down. So let me know what you guys think. Were you as impressed with this performance as I was? What do you think should be next for him? What do you think is going to be in store if he fights Bivol? What do you think is going to be in store if Canelo ends up fighting Beterbiev? Mind you, I think that would be a horrible decision. I'd be shocked if Canelo took that fight, especially at this point, especially after coming off that loss to Bivol and seeing all the shots that he got caught with, seeing the way that he couldn't break down the bigger, stronger man with his punches. Now you're going to go in there against a guy who's looked like he's carved out of stone. A guy who just has incredible punching power and he just wants to slam those fists into your head all night long. Ooh, man. So I would be surprised if Canelo took that fight. But I don't think that will be, that big Canelo payday won't be in store for Beterbiev. Goes that way sometimes. But let me know what you guys think.